I'm gonna goof around because I know you, but you probably don't remember knowing me. But
oh my God,
I have
hair in this photo,
and I'm skinny in this photo, and my wife doesn't want to acknowledge this photo. Do you remember doing Dixie Trek in 1987?
I do. I actually do.
That is us.
Yeah,
I think my wife was one of the ones that picked you up at the airport.
Oh, I remember. Oh, now this is all coming back. Yeah.
And we spent a lot of time talking about David Letterman and kind of hanging out.
I think I'd just done Letterman.
Yeah.
The infamous Icebox set. It's the coldest theater. It's the old Ed Sullivan Theater. But you always want to do that because that's what the Beatles perform.
So it is good to see you again.
Well, thanks. It's great to be back. I partied a little last night. I'm sure some of you did too. These swollen eyes are either courtesy of sulfites in the wine or staying up too late with Lance Hendrickson. I'm not sure which.
So what have you been up to in the last 22 years?
Well, I'm sure. I mean, the joke, it seems, on the program refers to lizard breath.
Well, you know where that comes from? That comes from my autograph that you gave me that I need a do-over on because it's fading.
Oh, okay, I'll give you. I hate this photo. I mean, my God, the 80s were cruel.
And that's what you
like a test pilot for Leo Sayer here. You're dancing. Let me tell you the story about this photo because I hate this photo. I was doing the Rolling Stone cover as Freddy Kreuger, and it was a break in the miniseries of V, and they ripped the makeup off me, and I did that. There's a great, some of you may have seen this, there's a classic photo of the original Leatherface, the original Jason, and myself with the Hollywood sign. We took it up by the Hollywood sign in the Hollywood Hills. And we're all, sort of posed there with our weapons. And they took that, it's a great photo. Every once in a while, a fan will bring that. There's a nice blow-up of it. I don't know who's selling it, but it's great. I wish I had one in my office. And I had just done that publicity session and got the call to do the TV Guide stuff for V. And that's a TV Guide photo from V for advertising in TV Guide. And I ran across town, but they tore the makeup off me. And I was about as swollen as I am this morning after the white wine I consumed last night from France. So, not that I had too much, but that I think I'm allergic to the sulfites. But I also probably had too much. But so that's the history behind this strange photo of Willie. Although I just brought one to the con, I found one on my wall in my office in an old dusty black frame of me and Jennifer Cook, the star child from V, the series. And Jennifer was a wonderful actress and a soap opera star. She never had a youth. She was one of those child actors that was so busy. And if you guys know, next to our action television, the most difficult job in show business is soap opera, because all you do is eat, sleep, and learn lines and perform. And Jennifer had spent her entire teenage years doing that, and then she went straight into V. And I also realized that Jennifer is one of the original victims of Jason in Friday the 13th, so she's sort of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon and Robert Englund. And since Freddy and Jason finally threw down a couple of years ago. But I brought the photo to the con, and about every 15 people that I'm giving autographs to, they see that and they recognize that. And it was rare as of yesterday. I'm sure it's been duplicated and is already on eBay, but for any true hardcore V fans, it's been on my wall for about 30 years. And I had a whole bunch of them made up, and I'm pimping my photo. But maybe we should just turn this over to a kind of general Q&A, and if you just speak up. Well, and I've got lots of gossip, you guys. I've worked with everybody from Henry Fonda, to Jenna Jameson. So I run the gamut of Holly Weird. The town has been very good to me, and I've got great stories, and you can ask me about anything. I got a lot of stuff that just recently came out on DVD that I'm kind of proud of. For really smart fans of horror, I've been privileged to be in 2 deconstructed horror films. Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which I think is a terrific film and preceded the Scream films, which a lot of fans don't like, but when you realized that that was a kind of a Bloody Valentine Wes gave to you guys, because he was acknowledging how smart and clever you guys were, but also trying to have his cake and eat it too by scaring you at the same time and mocking you. And Freddy's, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which he did before that, was our affectionate Valentine to you, by saying that we know that you know what we're up to, but we still want to try to scare you anyway. And we also were very self-deprecating in that. And then more recently, the film I would start this digression about, which is called Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon, which is a down and dirty, low-budget independent made by some very bright young people out of the University of Pennsylvania, and a great performance as a retired serial killer by Scott Wilson from the original In Cold Blood. He now plays Mark Helgenberger's father on CSI. And I'm in it doing my best Donald Pleasance Halloween impression. But anyway, ask me anything you want. Let's turn the floor over to you, the reason that I'm here.
We've got a mic, so you hear a little bit better. So if you've got a question, raise your hand and we'll get the mic to you.
Please step to the center aisle to ask it.
Do you have any input into the new Freddy movie they're making?
I'm on my way in a matter of weeks to Italy to star in a film, do my best sort of Vincent Price, Klaus Kinski. A terrific little script. It's sort of Rebecca meets House of Wax. And they seduced me into this film because the location is just magnificent, you guys. I'm going to be working for at least a month in this gorgeous villa in Umbria, which is the Gothic area of Italy behind the lovely sunny area of Tuscany. And then I go into pre-production on a movie that I'm directing based on a Nikolai Gogol short story called The V, which is about a fallen angel, the guard of purgatory. And I'm hoping to make it very romantic and gothic and dark, a dark fairy tale. A fallen priest, a fallen angel, a dead girl, who will win? But anyway, so my plate's kind of full, so I'm over in Italy scouting locations a month ago when the news broke about the remake of the original Nightmare on Elm Street. I didn't know about this, and as you know, New Line Cinema got folded into Warner Brothers, Time Warner. And apparently Michael Bay is producing, so that may be a good sign. I actually love Transformers, and I think if Michael Bay is putting his name on it, that he probably has some great ideas. I just hope they reinterpret it. The original is a little primitive by today's standards, and it's a low-budget film, but I think it's wonderful. Like the original King Kong is wonderful, I think, and the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre is wonderful and is seminal in its own way, in casting as well as Tobe Hooper's invention of effects in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, as well as the great Ray Harryhausen's work and the kind of classic. It's all, for me, when I see King Kong, the original now, it's almost like turning the pages of a children's storybook that my grandmother left me. And there's something about the innocence and seeing Johnny Depp and that young with that baby face, and Wes working low budget and independent of the original Nightmare that I like. But I am hoping that Michael Bay and company will put all of their great ideas. I'm hoping they'll cast maybe some unknowns in the part, maybe reinterpret Freddy a bit. I mean, obviously he has to be burned, but maybe he doesn't wear quite the same outfit. Maybe he wears the overalls of a janitor, which he is, or something, and they're seared to his flesh or something. And maybe they can get even younger kids, because we sort of straddle the line between what Freddy really is about and what he was really killing. He was actually he's haunting the dreams of the offspring of the people that burned him alive. It's sort of the essence of the mythology, but maybe they bring in some more of the backstory, make it darker, and I'm hoping they have fun with it. I'm kind of curious to see, and I certainly am all for them introducing, and I know that CGI can be a dirty word in some circles, but I think that if any remake in recent years lends itself to the new technologies, it's certainly A Nightmare on Elm Street, because the dream sequence, the surrealism inherent in the dream landscape in the nightmare, could be really fully exploited using the new technologies in CGI. So I'm kind of looking forward to it. I was at Comic-Con promoting some new DVD releases, and I just got back from Italy, and one of the journalists there stood up in front of 2,000 people and said, Mr. Englund, so what do you think of Billy Bob Thornton as Freddy Kreuger? And I thought that because I'd been in Italy, I thought I'd missed an ad in the trades, or a press release, or something on CNN or on E! Entertainment or something, and that Billy Bob was signed to do Fred. And I love Billy Bob Thornton. I think he's a terrific, versatile actor. I love, Sling Blade and Bad Santa, and I think he's an interesting actor. And, first in line for Angelina Jolie, he's the man. Right? So I thought it was an interesting idea. I said, I love Bob. I said just what I said to you guys. I said, I love Billy Bob, and that's interesting, and if he wants to play it, he sure must have some ideas. Well, that turned out to be like I was set up by a journalist, so that was kind of a bogus report. Apparently, Billy Bob doesn't have anything to do with the project. So I want to straighten that rumor out. But anyway, that's all I know. That's all the dish I have on the remake. There's a writer's been hired, but there's no script as of now. More questions?
Which one of the Freddy movies was your favorite to do?
Let's see. I think probably again Wes Craven's New Nightmare, because it was a reunion, and I'd had enough of a break, from the makeup. I had done Stephen King's The Mangler and Dwight Little's Phantom of the Opera over in Europe. And those are pretty extensive makeups. But I'd had a break. I was doing Disney movies at the time. I just worked with a kid that had just been discovered, named Paul Walker, in a Disney movie, and then I did another family film just to sort of have another side of the coin of Robert Englund. And so when I did that, it was nice to see John Saxon again, because John Saxon, you guys, people don't, if you look at, check out that resume. This is a man that's worked with Bruce Lee, Marlon Brando, James Dean, and Elvis Presley, Truly hung out with the icons of the 20th century, literally. And a gentleman, and he still looks younger than I do. And so it was fun to see John again, and Heather, and Wes, and work with everybody. And I love that project. I love The New Nightmare. I think it's really smart. And I think it really holds up, except for the phones. I think it's a good film, and it came at a nice beat in the box set. I think it really makes a nice bookend to the sort of Nightmare on Elm Street's Freddy versus Jason being a kind of hybrid. More questions?
How did you feel about working on the TV show versus the movies of Nightmare on Elm Street?
Well, they convinced me to do the television show by giving me my Director Guild card. I directed several episodes of it. But it's kind of fun. I know in England you can get all of them. And I had a fan finally find them all and give them all to me on DVD. But it's amazing who's on that show. Lori Petty, Brad Pitt. It's amazing who's directing the episodes. It's amazing who some of the cameramen are. The problem with Freddy's Nightmares, the TV series, was it was syndicated, and we were promised we would be on after 11 o'clock at night. So we had some really nasty scripts and some really creepy, dark, subversive ideas for American television. And those of you that saw my Showtime Masters of Horror, Dance of the Dead, know that I like to push the envelope on television. I really am for cable. I think cable is really a positive force in American culture because it's uncensored, like network TV is. If you watch network TV, you I don't think you're allowed to even smoke a cigarette until like 9:45, in prime time. There's all these weird rules. And it's very liberating to work on cable. And we were promised, because the show was syndicated, that we were going to be on after 11 o'clock at night, which meant back in the 80s we could get away with a lot. What happened was, once they sold it into syndication, I know we were on in the Bible Belt at like 4 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the afternoon. So we got in a lot of trouble, we had a lot of censorship problems, a lot of great scripts that were the reason many talented people, I know Gil Adler, who went on to sort of save Tales of the Crypt and keep it on the air for like about 5 years. Gil Adler left our show because of all of the problems with censorship and everything. And I can't tell you the great scripts we were not able to do. So it became a frustrating experience, even though I was having fun directing on the show. And it was that real kind of down and dirty, quick, handheld kind of directing, which I like. there wasn't an abundance of money on that project. More questions? Way in the back, I see a gentleman. He's either on the phone or he's... I thought there was a phone booth back there.
I was wondering, what was your experiences working on the set with Tobe Hooper for Night Terrors?
Well, I worked with Tobe Hooper on a lot of things. He actually did the pilot for Freddy's Nightmares that we were just discussing. And Tobe Hooper also directed my Dance of the Dead. That's the Showtime Masters of Horror that I did. That was actually nominated for a Cable Ace Award. And I did several movies with Tobe in Europe, including one that's been on Cinemax a lot lately. It's not an early Stephen King, but kind of a midpoint Stephen King project based on a very short story in the same anthology that Maximum Overdrive is in, and it's called The Mangler. But it's sort of rising like cream in the sort of Stephen King pantheon of films. There's some interesting stuff in that film, and I like the art direction, and I'm really proud of my makeup and character in that, because it was taken out of one sentence from the Stephen King anthology, and I sort of made him, I sort of combined the lady from Shanghai, Orson Welles' husband, with Harry Truman from Hell on that character. Tobe is great, and Night Terrors was a lot of fun. Tobe Hooper, I think he has an IQ of about 250. He's like so smart, and he's a character. He kind of talks like this. Robert, on this take, could you kind of beat the mother to death, kind of like one of the Sam Peckinpah character actors, from the Wild Bunch, Robert and action. But he's a genius. I was with Tobe in Israel doing a movie, and we went out in this beautiful little Arab village, and there was the call to prayer, and we were down in this little beach cafe run by the Israeli Arabs, and we were overlooking this rock promontory that was covered by the incoming tide. And Tobe actually knew the history of these rocks, that they were the source of one of the Prometheus legends, being torched, hung out to dry with the bird, the eagle, the vulture eating you alive. And he knows all this stuff. He's amazing, and he's wonderful to work with. And I sometimes go years without seeing Tobe, and then we'll work together. And it's like, we just hung out the night before. He's really a great guy and really a bright director. And I know, he sort of had some misgivings about, being typecast in horror for a while, and I think he's made peace with that and really embraced his calling. But he's very funny. He has a great sense of humor, not unlike Wes Craven and Sam Raimi. I love Poltergeist. I think it's a terrific movie, and there was some controversy. Some of you are too young to remember, was it a Spielberg movie or a Tobe Hooper movie? It's a Tobe Hooper movie. Spielberg would never have a mom and dad smoking dope. It's a Tobe Hooper movie. And Spielberg knew that Tobe was the perfect director for it. And so you have to compliment Spielberg also for choosing and selecting Tobe for that project. But he's a terrific director and an underrated director. And I'll tell you, if some of you are sci-fi fans and fantasy fans, but for those of you that like the world of horror, if you watch the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's brutal and it's primal and it gets under your skin and it's difficult to watch. But that movie is one of the most ripped off films of the 20th century. And I'm talking everybody, I'm talking the biggest Oscar-winning directors in the business have borrowed from that movie. How many times have you seen hanging chains and hanging things swinging in the foreground? That's the first time ever in that film. How many times have you seen that old fan with a light behind it? How many times has Ridley Scott and all the directors that we all love used that first time ever Texas Chainsaw Massacre? The use of the stairs, with the exception of Psycho, never before milked and exploited like that. Yeah, he's really a true filmmaker, like Brian De Palma, Kathleen Bigelow, and others. He's really a talented guy, and I'd show up and work for Tobe, in a minute again. Another question. The lovely knee-length jeans are courtesy of the Gap.
Hi, Mr. Raymond. Question for you. I know you originally started with theater, and I was wondering if you had a chance to pursue any endeavors in theater these days, or if you
The last theater endeavor that I was involved with was I worked with the late John Ritter and the head of the New York City Center Ballet, Jacques d'Amboise, whose daughter is the star of Chicago, Roxy Hart. And we did a show at the Mark Taper Forum, and then shortly thereafter, in the very late 80s, I produced a play in Los Angeles by a young up-and-coming playwright named John Patrick Shanley, who went on to win the Oscar for Moonstruck with Nicolas Cage. And John Patrick Shanley always has a play on Broadway or off Broadway. And that play starred, I starred this actor that I love from Raising Arizona, Sam McMurray, who I recently just directed in I did a film for what I call Men Without Driver's Licenses. 15-year-old boys when your hormones rage, but you can't get the girl because all the older boys are dating them because they have driver's licenses. So I made a movie for 15-year-old boys called Killer Pad. It's just a little silly teen comedy. But I got Sam McMurray to show up, and he does a great turn in that. But the play that I did, which was called Savage in Limbo, was written for Sam McMurray. Everybody knew who he was in New York, and he never got to do the part. And so I produced it in LA and managed to get him to star in it and do the show in LA, and we won a bunch of awards. But that's the last theatrical endeavor I've done. I'll probably get back into it. I'll probably definitely direct theater again because you can really control the visuals, the frame. You don't have to surrender part of your efforts to the editor. In movies and television, as you probably know, the real god is the film editor. He's really the final say, and you really have to, as a director, you really sort of have to get in bed with the editor and really make him understand your vision and then surrender to his vision and his rhythms. But I worked here 100 years ago in a galaxy far away, right around the corner here in Peachtree at the Atlanta Arts Alliance. And worked regional theater all around here, and Meadowbrook Theater in Detroit, and I worked in Chicago and off-Broadway. I was in Godspell. I played Judas in Godspell. So I did a lot of stage. But there's a thing that happens just before the lights come up and you go on. You really do get nervous, and you get a little stomach ache. And I always thought that would go away. But it doesn't. It gets worse. I mean, apparently Laurence Olivier used to have a bucket backstage he would throw up in every night, even when he was in his 60s. And I kind of fear I think that I have that pressure too. I wouldn't mind maybe, going somewhere like Portland, Oregon, or maybe a small resort town, down here on the Gulf or something, and doing a nice little David Mamet play or something without the pressure. But or maybe taking over for a role off Broadway. There'd be no pressure to do that. But I don't know if I'll be walking the boards anytime in the near future. I've got a pretty full plate with the 2 projects in Italy, and we'll have to see. Another question.
Your sense of humor as Freddy Kreuger, is that your spin on it, or was that in the script?
No, the sense of humor, the Freddy, the Freddy probably being the first horror villain with a personality and a sense of humor. Although I think Sam Raimi certainly played with that in Evil Dead and Army of Darkness. Evil Dead preceded Nightmare on Elm Street. But not necessarily the character. Although because Bruce wasn't the villain. Bruce is pretty funny, but Bruce wasn't the villain. I love Bruce Campbell. Anyway, I think it's all Wes. I mean, I'm your boyfriend now, the tongue in the phone, Freddy cutting off his fingers, all that stuff is Wes Craven. And then the fans love that because it was a first. That was very subversive, and it also, by getting people to laugh, you release nervous tension. Then it's easier to set an audience up cathartically to scare them again. It's much easier if you guys laugh at something to get you scared again than if we just try to sustain the tension for 90 minutes. This is one of Wes's, tricks, and it's also a trick in the theater. And we went a little too far with the humor in the Nightmare movies. In part 6, I'm running around chasing Roseanne Barr, and it's practically like a Roadrunner cartoon. But we were doing that intentionally. I mean, we were pushing the envelope intentionally that way. The director Rachel Talalay, who did Tank Girl, with Lori Petty and I. We were conscious of that. Rachel also did that great TV show that got canceled about the whole town of wolves with Lou Diamond Phillips, you know. A great series that got canceled right around 9/11. I think it was because of 9/11. But I love that show, and I was going to be on that show. But Rachel's a talent. Rachel and I, we wanted to push the envelope and make it cartoony. That was wrong. But Wes used to get upset as far back as part 3 that there was too much comedy and too many one-liners. And I said, Wes, you opened the door. You set it up. What happened with the humor sometimes is, at the end of the scene, if I ended a scene and put the button on a scene, as we say, there might have been 2 options. For instance, I might have been killing Ken Sagos, the young black actor, in part 4, and maybe I killed him really brutally and gave him kind of like a kiss of death, you know. And then maybe we tried it again, and I had a line, one of the Freddy lines, you know. I was just at a radio show, and they had me doing all of the proverbs in the Freddy voice, you know. A stitch in time saves 9. But, you know, the Freddy lines, right? And so we would do it both ways. But what happened is, when we rushed some of the Freddy movies in post-production, the editor relied too much on the natural rhythm and the natural punctuation point of a Freddy joke to end a scene. And so sometimes when they probably should have ended it dark, with maybe me just giving the kiss of death to some kid as I hugged him to death or something, or stabbed him, they chose to go with a funny line, which I think threw off the rhythm a little bit of the character, and it took a little bit of it denuded Freddy a little bit, you know. It took a little bit of his cojones away, and a little bit of his darkness and strength away. But that was an editorial decision. I don't even know if it was always a directorial decision. And I think that's one of Wes's gripes with some of the 7 films. Yes?
Curious, will you ever do Freddy again in any way, shape, or form that you know of?
Well, I've heard that the prequel script was terrific, and I would have loved to have played Fred Kreuger, you know, and done it and at one time I heard John McNaughton's name bandied about. I don't know if you've seen Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, but it's a great use of documentary style to tell a serial killer's story, especially at that point in time when he did Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. Most of the people that were doing that were the disease of the week chick flicks. You know, I'm going to beat cancer in 90 minutes, and there'll be a commercial for Kotex. You know, so it was kind of refreshing to see somebody take that style away from the chick flick disease of the week movie and use it for us.
I was just going to say, that's another film to me, like Texas Chainsaw, that's kind of groundbreaking.
Yeah.
How everybody's doing that.
Yeah, and that style got exploited, but people forget John McNaughton was the first. But John McNaughton's name was mentioned in connection with this wonderful prequel script for Nightmare on Elm Street. You know, Fred Kreuger, the first kills, or whatever they were going to call it, you know. And I imagined it like a documentary, Law and Order. You know, dead children, who did it? A couple of cops, one of them's an alcoholic trying to solve it, you know. Finally they find this guy, this janitor, maybe he did it, you know, but they don't get their Miranda rights, or they don't get the right, you know, a thing for a search, and Fred Kreuger gets off, and then you cast 2 great character actors to play the horrible big city lawyers that get Fred Kreuger off, and Fred Kreuger gloats when he's out of jail, and the lawyers, you know, take their money, and now the vigilante parents burn Freddy alive, and the movie's over. So I kind of love that, and I kind of wanted to be part of that. But I think they're going to fold some of that script into the remake of the original Nightmare on Elm Street and give it a more backstory and make it darker. So I don't know if I'll ever be doing Freddy again. I know there's not, you know, they were talking to John Carpenter for a while. I don't know if that was what that was about, whether they were going to have him do the remake of Friday the 13th, or whether they were thinking of having John Carpenter do, you know, a Freddy with Michael Myers. You know, I just hope they don't have me mud wrestle with Chucky. Where is that? Bratdorf, come on down! More questions.
I was wondering what things in the genre kind of get under your skin and keep you up at night.
I love this question because I'm all over the place with, you know, I love good science fiction, I love good fantasy, I love romantic, you know, dark romantic stuff. recently it's strange for me. I saw, I'm on a lot of juries, hanging out with Christopher Lee in Brussels, and I do film juries in Brussels. I've done them in San Sebastian, Sitges, Spain, several other places, and I was sort of there when all of the Japanese horror first broke, and I was hanging out with those directors, and I saw it all originally. I mean, I saw Dark Water at like midnight in Belgium with Christopher Lee, and we both looked at each other afterwards like, we had to go out and have a bottle of wine. It was great. And there's something about the Japanese horror, left alone, that is just different enough from us, culturally, and distinct enough that it's exotic to our eye, and we love it. And it makes it, I like it a lot. And I didn't like it being changed, but I just saw my old pal from Urban Legend, Joshua Jackson, in Shudder. And I love the concept, the conceit of taking the Americans back to Japan. And I thought it was a very stylish, simple film. But I liked it. I liked the production design. I liked the acting. I liked the girl a lot. I liked where it went. I liked the gimmick of the ghosting image, in the frame. So I like that film. I just saw that recently on DVD, and I also like the one with Josh Hartnett that recently came out, 30 Days of Night. I like the gimmick. I'm a big fan of Danny Houston. I don't know if you guys watched it as closely as I did, but there's a very subtle makeup in that on Danny Houston, on a couple of the other sort of prime vampires in that. It almost looks like the makeup on Jude Law for AI. It's very subtle. It's almost a melted look. I love the female vampire in that, and I loved the fact that everybody was trapped. There's a claustrophobic sense to that when the man with Alzheimer's begins to moan in the attic, and the vampires are there. I mean, it really got me. It truly scared me. It reminded me a bit of John Carpenter's remake of The Thing, which is one of my favorite all-time horror movies. If you want to know some of my favorites, again, John Carpenter's remake of The Thing, so you get a sense of my taste. Brian De Palma's 70s film, Sisters, with Margot Kidder. I think William Findlay in that film is the all-time best mad scientist outside of the guy in Bride of Frankenstein. I love the classic Deborah Kerr, The Innocents. I love Rosemary's Baby, but I love good, dark, nasty stuff too. Obviously, Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. First time I saw that, I saw the original Hellraiser on Hollywood Boulevard. I was the only person in the theater, and it hadn't been dubbed yet with American accents. All by myself, doing research before I directed 976 Evil. I was just looking for ideas, and that got to me. And I like big budget stuff too, and I like fantasy, I like science fiction. I think the second Alien is a great film. It's just a great, great film. I mean, I think it treads into an imaginative conceit that is so wonderful. There's so much of Hollywood to steal from. There's so many parts of the menu, and to take the 1940s Bette Davis, Joan Crawford bitch slap fight, and to hide it and bury that into a great sci-fi Giger-styled film with our characters that we've grown to love, and have the whole movie culminate with those two women, well, that female, that alien, go at each other. I just love that. I mean, I love that because it's also, you're working all those buttons, you're pushing those buttons too. We forget sometimes all the buttons that are getting pushed, But I also love, I'm a big fan of heroes, I'm a big fan of heroes. My buddy Jack Coleman from Nightmare Cafe, is and I love Jack because I'm an actor. We see them dropping hints just like you guys do when you go blogging and looking for little subtle hints. But knowing Jack, the moment I saw those glasses, I said, I don't know, he could be Cancer Man. I see a little bit of that. You got to watch that character. That's a twisted character. He's Daddy. Oh, Daddy. I'm sitting next to Hayden signing autographs. I got to go over and tell her to give my best to Jack. But I'm just so happy for Jack, because he's a great old friend and he's a wonderful actor, and he's got a home run now with heroes internationally and obviously here, and it's great to see my buddy there. I'm all over the map though, you know, and I sometimes wait till after the hype, you know, and go out and rent a DVD or something to see something and find it, so that I'm not thinking of what, you know, E! Entertainment says and Fango and everybody tells me to like or not like. It's sometimes it's sort of just it's about the mood. Sometimes it's seeing it in the dark collectively. You know, there's some movies. I know we all want the big flat screen and we all want the home theater, and we can all have the DVDs, you know, and the box sets of our favorite elements of the genre, whatever that might be, science fiction, fantasy, horror, etc. But it's sometimes you really need to pay a couple of bucks and go see some movies that are meant to be seen on the big screen. I had some problems with King Kong, with the casting, but Peter Jackson got me completely back once they went to New York. Once they got into New York. I thought that the ending of that movie was sublime filmmaking. I mean, when the sound cuts out and Kong is on the Empire State Building and there's no sound and it's just those planes circling, you know, it's like a ballet. And, you know, here I am with a chip on my shoulder for some of the casting, and yet by the end of that film, but it was because I saw it in the biggest theater in America in Irvine, California, Irvine Spectrum, you know, I mean, it's just, you can't believe what it's like to see a movie there. And I snuck in on opening day, you know, and it was just amazingly sublime contemporary filmmaking. And so I think sometimes you gotta, you know, get out there and see it in the theater. You know, same thing with Heath Ledger's performance in Batman. I mean, it took me 3 or 4 days to figure out what this was. Yeah, and I know I sound a little bit like my Tobe Hooper impression, but you know what I'm saying with his performance. And then I realized he's been cut. The smile is permanent and cut, and he's playing with the scar tissue on the inside. And we have a thing, actors have a thing we say calling use it. You know, if you hurt your toe and you limp, use it as an actor. You know, you have to really use that. And I'm sure Heath had some crap in the corners of his mouth from the makeup, from the prosthetics, from the foam latex. And he was probably dealing with that a little bit because he maybe never worn, you know, effects makeup before. And he just said, I'm going to use that because obviously, if I had the cut is on the inside of his mouth too, and we all know what it's like to have a mouth sore or to bite the inside of your cheek when you're eating too fast. And you know, you're doing this all the time. And he used that for the character. And I just thought, God, this guy, I mean, he's just so dangerous, you know, of an actor, so rock and roll, and so great with those choices. And, you know, I miss him. I mean, now I just think of, just imagine him, you know, playing a rock star or all the different parts he could have played. And it's really sad and a loss. But again, Batman on the big screen, you know, it was like, you have to do that. You have to, I don't care how big your plasma is. That's a movie to see with an audience because Heath Ledger had everybody in the audience when I saw it with him. And it was palpable. You could just feel it. It's like being in a Broadway theater, you know. So that's me digressing on the kind of stuff I like. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
You've played so many dark characters. What got you into playing Willie?
No, actually, I was nothing but nice guys and best friends and sidekicks. And I was typed as a Southerner. You know, and I'm not a Southerner, I'm a California boy. And I'm English trained, you know, I'm a Royal Academy brat. I'm a Yank of the RAF. And I was a snob, and I was, you know, I starred in my first movie in 1973, spring of 1973. I'm an old dog. And I starred in my first 3 movies right near here. I was in Statesboro, Georgia for 3 months. And Birmingham, Alabama for 15 weeks. And I did a lot of movies in the South. I had done one Tennessee Williams play. And what I did on each movie was I would just go into a bar, wherever I was, and I'd find one Southern accent I could do. It might not have been the right one, but I'd find one that I could do because, you know, one that just sort of fit in my mouth. Because every county in the South, the accent changes slightly. There is no true accent. Every couple of counties or so, Tennessee is different from Georgia, is different from Mississippi, is different, and you hear it as an actor. You hear it's different, but you've got to just find one that you feel real with. And so I was playing Southerners, and I was playing best friends, and I was playing sidekicks all through the 70s. I worked with Susan Sarandon, I worked with Barbara Streisand, I worked with Burt Reynolds, I worked with Henry Fonda, I worked with Jeff Bridges, Sally Field, Scatman Crothers, Joanna Cassidy from Blade Runner. I was all over the map. I worked with great directors like Robert Mulligan, who did, To Kill a Mockingbird. I worked with Daniel Petrie, who directed the original Raisin in the Sun. Discovered every great African-American actor in this country, the whitest man in the world, and loved black theater in New York at the time, and did Raisin in the Sun. I got to work with Dan Petrie. Bob Rafelson discovered Jack Nicholson, 5 Easy Pieces. I got to work with him. So I was spoiled rotten, and I was a movie star in the 70s. And then I got typed as a redneck towards the end. So I moved into some bad guys. I was sort of everybody's go-to white trash redneck boy. And then that gave me, I realized the bad guys are written really well. And then I did Willie. And Willie, it's almost like I had to dumb down for Willie, because Willie was, the joke was, 2 things that Ken Johnson told me. He said, Gene Wilder, see all his movies. And it wasn't the producers, it was a movie called Quacks Her Fortune Has a Cousin Living in the Bronx with Margot Kidder. And I borrowed a little bit from that, and then Ken Johnson said, the aliens, the lizards, trained Willie in Arabic. Willie was supposed to have been sent to Cairo or Baghdad, and instead they sent him to LA. So Willie doesn't speak English. Willie's translating like a little computer all the time. Hence, when they ask him, why he doesn't eat mice, he says, I'm a veterinarian. Bad pun, but we loved it in the 80s. So, those are the tricks that I use. But after Willie, I got typed as sort of like, an innocent guy. And in the middle of doing Willie, which was a long time, remember it was 10 hours miniseries and 22 hours of television series. That's 32 hours, which is actually a lot. That's 3 seasons almost these days, And miniseries take longer to shoot than television. And so what happened was, in the middle of all that, I got the offer to do The Nightmare on Elm Street, and I went back to V, and that was my first taste of celebrity. And they flew me to Milan, Italy, and I had rejected this trip twice, and it was called the Telegato Awards, TV Cat, which is their TV guide. And I won Best Supporting Actor. I beat out Richard Chamberlain from the Thornbirds. And I sat between Catherine Deneuve and Dustin Hoffman, and across from the guy that played the French Connection. And I thought, this is great, And that was my first inkling of the power of science fiction, how universal it is, how people they loved it in Europe. And so the doors began to open for me in Europe. I came back and finished the series. And we got canceled because we were so expensive. It was a huge mistake. The network, Brandon Tartikoff actually called me once and told me it was a mistake to cancel the show. And then I was with William Shatner in New York signing autographs on Madison Avenue and 47th Street, an old hotel. And it was a rainy day, and my line was as long as William Shatner's, out into the rain. And halfway through my line, the Willie fans changed into like really sexy girls with punk rock dog collars on and mohawks. And the boys all turned into sort of speed metal, heavy metal, punk rock boys. And they were all asking for Freddy autographs. And Nightmare on Elm Street had only been released on the East Coast, limited release, and had just taken, there was no hype for the original Nightmare on Elm Street. You guys all discovered it. It was completely unhyped film. And it was discovered organically by the audience. It's what we call an organic hit. And that's when I had the inkling that Nightmare on Elm Street was taking off. And they both took off simultaneously. So the genre fans are responsible, for me having my little cottage at the beach, in Laguna Beach, because I had a 1-2 punch with science fiction and horror. And it's also because science fiction, fantasy, and horror fans, it's an international language. You speak an international language. I mean, I could take you guys we could all fly right now to a festival in Spain or Belgium or somewhere, and you guys would have, you'd be complete, have everything in common with the fans there. I mean, it's amazing. They love our cyberpunk. They love the same actors. It's amazing. And So that was this big happy accident and gift to my career. How are we doing on time? Good?
Yeah, about another 20 minutes.
20 minutes? Yes.
I wanted to know, when you did the Phantom of the Opera,
Yeah.
what was it like doing her makeup where she was supposed to take the skin?
Phantom of the Opera makeup is the most difficult makeup. Well, there's two. Phantom of the Opera is makeup over makeup. I wish I had a picture with me. There's one back in the autograph room. Kevin Yeager, man that produced Sleepy Hollow, man that designed Chucky, man that designed the Crypt Keeper, did the Freddy makeup for 6 movies, married to Seventh Heaven, Catherine Hicks, bride of Chucky, or Chucky's first girlfriend. Peggy Sue got married. Kevin Yeager, who Spider Chronicles, did all the effects in that, just came out. Kevin designed the makeup for Phantom of the Opera. And I was disfigured. And then our idea was, because we took our Phantom from Paris and put him in Jack the Ripper's London, was that the Phantom was obsessed with Beethoven. And you know those little tacky Beethoven busts that you see made of plaster of Paris? So my hair was styled like that. And then I would kill people and I would use their flesh, I would skin them and put that over my disfigurement and tighten it almost like a facelift. And there's actually a scene where you see me stitching it. And then I would go out to the opera and sit in the dark, in the candlelight of the 19th century, so I could hear the opera, which was my beloved music. So that was the concept of that makeup. So that was a very tricky makeup. That was a minimum of 5 hours every morning. And we shot that in Budapest, Hungary. So that was tricky. We ran out of some of the products there. And then the Mangler, the Stephen King movie I did, that makeup was stretched, my skin stretched, then stippled, then released, and it would naturally wrinkle. And then those wrinkled lines would blend with the prosthetic pieces of this sort of Harry Truman character, Bill Garrick, that I played. And I look kind of like the great old Orson Welles, what are they called? Mercury Players character that was in Citizen Kane and Lady from Shanghai and that, but like as if the nose was just, because I think the concept of that was that he was probably 150 years old. And that makeup wasn't so difficult to apply, but that was very, very difficult to remove because the real skin bonded with the prosthetics. And so that took forever to get off. I barely made last call. You know, we shot that in Toronto and South Africa. I was pretty crazed after that. The makeup for Freddy vs. Jason, where I do all my own water stunts and that's me coming out of the lake and everything. And that, they put too much glue on me. They sealed me up like a condom because they didn't want me to leak. And again, that was at the beginning of the shoot. And they couldn't get that makeup off me because they used more glue than they normally use. The medical adhesive, the kind of colostomy bag, the medical adhesive that we use in the special effects makeup. And they scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed. They finally got it off, but now my skin was raw and blistered from the removal. So thank God I only had to put the normal Freddy makeup on for like maybe 2 days, and then I had like a 4-day break and let my skin kind of breathe and heal. But those are the roughest ones. But I can't be the martyr anymore because there's people wearing far more extensive makeups than me. My buddy Ron Perlman, that's a pretty extensive makeup. I think that one of the best makeups ever was, and I'm not crazy about the film, but the Tom Cruise film, the Tom Cruise film Willow. Legend. I'm sorry, not Willow. Legend. Tim Curry's makeup in that apparently was a very, very extensive makeup and maybe one of the most famous ever. So I probably had worn more makeup than anybody except maybe Lon Chaney, because 8 movies plus Phantom of the Opera plus The Mangler plus the television series. You know, and even Jack Brooks, this little fun film I have coming out this October. I do some goat bladders hidden on me in that too. So, oh look at, she doesn't like the word goat bladders. She just made a face when I said goat bladders. That's how we make our heads expand. You had a question. I just got the hard copy of V the Second Generation in the mail from Ken Johnson, and I haven't read it yet, but I hear I'm in it. So here's what I think is going to happen. I loved The Taken. I just thought it was extraordinary. The Spielberg, the sequence at the used car lot where they take the alien in and they're messing with him in the barber's chair, and he makes everybody shoot each other. I just thought it was brilliant. But there's a lot of elements in The Taken that are similar to the sort of backstory and where V was going to go. And so I think the executives at NBC saw the success of Steven Spielberg's The Taken on Sci-Fi Channel and said, well, we own the rights to V, let's bring V back. And they called Kenneth Johnson, and they were going to do that first. And that was a script. And then I think they decided, well, in this youth market of today, where we have 18-year-olds playing lawyers and doctors on TV, I said, when did you go to med school exactly? They decided they want to go with a young cast, a new cast. They're going to remake V with a young cast, attractive young performers. If that clicks with the audiences, then they're going to do V, The Next Generation, and they'll bring back Mark Singer and myself and Jane Badler and Faye Grant, and everybody. And we'll bring V back, with all of us, because we're supposed to be older. That's the point. And I think it's much more kind of post-apocalyptic, I know there was one moment in the series of V, we were shooting nights, and we were all acting this scene. I was hanging out with Michael Ironside and Mark that night. We had a scene by just an old barrel. All the set was a street, a wet street, a barrel with flames in it. We had a potato on a stick or something. We were heating our hands. There was an overturned car in the background. And we all looked at each other and we said, this is what the series should look like. We need more jeopardy in the series. It's too normal looking. This occupation needs to, we should be fighting over food. And the underground should be, doing raids at night. And I think if V, The Next Generation is more like that. I mean, obviously there's a lizard government and a lizard police force and all of that, but I think it should be a little more post-apocalyptic in feel. Certain elements of society have definitely broken down. Yes?
How is it emotionally and psychologically to be an archetype of terror?
On the first film, I used a little bit of my internal training tricks. I sat at the old Desilu Studios, I Love Lucy, on Cahuenga Boulevard, in the center of Hollywood, next to the two most beautiful kids in the world, Heather Langenkamp and Johnny Depp. They were the dewiest, fresh-faced, gorgeous kids you've ever seen in your life. I was in my very early 30s, and I'd done 12 or 15 movies. V, had started V, and I was wondering if this was the right decision. I chose to work with Wes Craven for the challenge of the makeup, and because Wes was sort of like the new David Lynch back then. But I looked over at Heather and Johnny, who don't need any makeup, and they're getting their hair done, and they're getting touched up, and they've got these little fans to keep them cool. It's summer. And I'm sitting there getting basted with KY jelly like a Thanksgiving turkey. And I thought, am I doing the right thing here? I don't know. And I was envious of their youth and their beauty, and they had their whole careers ahead of them. And now we know, great careers ahead of both of them. Johnny Depp, one of the biggest stars in the world now. And I used that envy. And I used a little bit of that jealousy of their youth and their beauty, and the fact they were getting pampered, and I wasn't. I was itching to death, And I used that as Freddy, because what does Freddy hate? He hates the future. He hates tomorrow. He hates youth. He hates children. There's no room for them in Freddy's world. That's why he has to kill them. Something terrible happened to Freddy when he was young. I think it was Alice Cooper. But the point is so I use that internally. But I would be lying to you if I told you that I use that in every other movie. Once you find that as an actor, it's like a little synapse. It's just like a memory. You just clicks. You know how to use it. It's just there. You can call upon it. And that's how we work. The only time actors really find the magic or the art is usually in rehearsal or in moments like that. Then our job it's like a craftsman, our job is to repeat it. So we have to repeat it from this angle, this angle, this angle, this angle. We have to repeat it from all those different angles. We have to match it. So it's not that we're robotic, but that's part of our craft. And the magic and the internal work is usually done, in the discovery section of acting. A couple more questions and then, yes.
Hi. Hello. I have a question about the original Freddy makeup. Through the first 5 movies, it seemed very, pretty. It was the same. And then the new Nightmare came out, and then Freddy vs. Jason. And not only did the makeup and costuming change a bit, but also the voice may have changed a bit as well.
The voice went back actually more to me. It's always my voice, but they played with it in post more in the in parts 1 and 2. They really tweaked my voice with a phaser, and in the mix. It's much more my voice in the later films. I can do the voice, but I talk very fast so that they can slow it down a little bit, which gives me a little bit of a basso profundo underneath it. The makeup originally was David Miller, who did the Michael Jackson video Thriller. David Miller created the makeup, and it was rougher and looked better further away from the camera in a nice cowboy shot. We call this a cowboy because the gun comes out of here when you cut somebody here. But when you got closer, it was a little rougher. It didn't look like a mask, because it wasn't. It was 14 different pieces seamed together. But it was a little rougher. It caught the light better. Then Kevin came on board, and Kevin's was much finer, much lighter. And the closer the camera got, the better it looked. It went right into my eyes. I'm selling a picture of one of the test makeups for Freddy vs. Jason, and you can see the prosthetic goes right to here. It literally glues down to my eyelashes. And that was the Kevin Yeager makeup. And he played around with the nose, made it a little witchy in 2, and changed it a little more cheekbone and scar here, and asymmetrical in 4, I believe. And then, and I can't remember his name now, the guy from Canada, wonderful guy, one of the best makeup shops I've ever been in, up in Canada. Bill Terazakis did Freddy vs. Jason. And he borrowed a little bit from all of the makeups, different aspects. And then the Demon Freddy, of course, it had to be a Demon Freddy for when I came out of the water. That was just a sort of a morphing of Freddy. Just like in Wes Craven's New Nightmare, that's like an Uber Freddy. That's how Freddy conceives of himself. In other words, one of the points to Wes Craven's New Nightmare was that maybe Wes Craven stole the idea of Freddy Kreuger from some essential evil mythology that really did exist, and Wes exploited it and bought himself a nice house on the top of Mulholland Drive, and we all benefited from this evil. And now this evil, this essential evil, wants to reclaim its true righteousness, and punishes Hollywood. And so that was sort of an Uber Freddy, a sort of Freddy in his own mind's eye, or a super Freddy. And so those are kind of the basic evolutions of the makeup. And there's happy accidents in show business. I have a narrow face and very broad shoulders for a guy my size. I'm just 5'10". And I take the makeup very well. It doesn't look phony on me because of the width of my shoulders. Some people put the makeup on and their heads look too big in movies. And you see it all the time. And I don't know whether Wes knew that, and Wes just said, let's hire the kid with a hatchet face, or whether it was because of the casting director, who was a huge fan of mine, and I had just tested for every role in a National Lampoon movie, and she felt terrible that I kind of canceled myself out. I had some of the biggest actresses in Hollywood calling to screen test with me for that part, because everybody thought I was going to be the lead in that movie, and I was up for like 3 or 4 parts in this National Lampoon movie, and I didn't get any because I kind of canceled myself out. And that casting director felt so terrible that she brought me in to meet Wes. But it might have been as simple as Wes just said, well, Robert Englund's got a thin face and the makeup will look good on him. I don't know. I really don't know. Wes had worked with makeup before. Maybe he just knew something. But how much I love to talk. You guys hear me here, blah, 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 blah. I kept my mouth shut on that interview with Wes Craven. I went into that interview, and I don't smoke, but my buddy does, and I took a little bit of ash out of the ashtray with my saliva and mixed it on my finger, put dark circles under my eyes. And they looked very natural, cigarette ash. Very subtle, you couldn't tell. And I had really long hair then, but my hairline was up here then, and so I slicked it back. So you could see more of my hairline. My hairline looked thinner. And I went in, and it was kind of greased down to my head, so I looked a little bald. And I just sat there and played staring games with Wes, because Wes was telling me the whole mythology and the whole backstory, and the story about how he and his brother had been frightened by this hobo we used to call them hobos, I think. Now, but I'm politically correct now, the homeless gentleman was hobos. Bum, who scared the bejesus out of Wes and his brother standing in front of their window when their mom and dad were out one night with soot and sores all over his face, hence Freddy Kreuger. And he told me all this stuff, and I just sat there and tried not to blink and looked in Wes's eyes like that old don't blink game we all played in elementary school. And maybe that's how I got the part. I don't know. Sometimes I've got to buy Wes a drink and get the truth of all that, although I don't, the past is so clouded in memories now. I don't think any of us know the truth anymore. Okay, the last question. Is that right? Yeah. Yes, sir.
Some of the more serious. It's not really on the camera or anything. What it is that all the years when we first started to be an actor, what inspired you to be an actor, and what heroes do you have?
Well, I think some of you remember this. I'm a generation older than everybody in this room, at least, and maybe 2 generations older than most of you. But I saw Forbidden Planet as a child, and that rocked my world. And I saw first generation black and white Twilight Zones as a child. And every little boy in our Levi's jeans and our Pennies Foremost t-shirts would stand in line, equal distance from the guy in front, and line up before we went into class. We'd say, "Did you see Twilight Zone last night? Did you get it? How to serve man? Get it? How to serve man?" And we were elated with that stuff. And you'd go to, we didn't have pause, and we didn't have VCR, and we didn't have DVDs, and you'd have to look through the TV guide, and you'd see Bride of Frankenstein, or you'd find some great movie, and you'd go sleep over at your friend's house in a penny sleeping bag, with the hunter and the geese flying against the red flannel sky. And you'd get a big can of popcorn, and you'd stay up late in your friend's room, and on the black and white giant television that were huge, you'd watch, and you'd see uncut, King Kong stepping on that little baby was still in the movies in the 50s. Smelling his fingers after he touches Fay Ray. Still in the movie, uncut version. You'd still see him throw that girl, Frankenstein, threw the little girl in the lake and broke her neck. That scene was still in the movie. And we'd all sit there, 8 years old, watching it. And I was inspired by that stuff. I would go to my godfather's house, top salesman for Simon & Schuster books. He had a whole room of coffee table books. And I would open one to the golden era of horror, which was the 1930s. And I'd see these great photos.